Hi. So let's, I don't know how much time I have, so I hope there's going to be questions and time for questions later on. 25? Okay, good. So, yeah, I've been at Metaverse Summit this weekend, and I've never been more convinced that there's massive problems with metaverses after being there. And some of these we're going to talk about today and possibly discuss in creative ways and how to solve them. But generally, I consider them quite deal-breaking problems that completely, well, dismantle the idea of metaverses today. And you'll see why. So just briefly about me, I'm Bruno. I founded RMRK. We make the NFT 2.0 standards, an open source set of standards that is the final evolution of NFTs that can do anything your NFT project might want to do. It makes every collection that launches on these standards mutually compatible with every other collection that existed in the past and every collection that will exist in the future. And by making this possible, it kind of solves a lot of these problems. Well, parts of them, as we'll see. I started in Ethereum in 2015 and worked on Ethereum 2.0 for a while, and then on Polkadot and Kusama, and then finally RMRK, which has also evolved significantly since its initial version. So before we get into it, we have to discuss what a metaverse actually is. And there are many definitions of this. Most of them rely on whatever the person selling it is selling. So usually that definition will be adopted to whatever's in the bottle, whatever's in the packaging. And for example, there was this one guy at the Metaverse Summit who connected a trampoline to some Peloton handles, and it gave you points for jumping around, and he called it a metaverse. And apart from making me want to die a little, I felt like this major disconnect between people who are trying to actually build a metaverse and people who are trying to actually build a metaverse. So a metaverse is, this is my definition, and yours may vary, but this is the one that I'm going by according to the definition by Neil Stephenson in the original book, Snow Crash, and it's kind of adapted to that. So a metaverse is a community-modifiable virtual environment in which reasonably unique representations of, and digitally scarce representations of a real human can easily interact with each other and then own that experience. And there are some important phrases in this that really have to be hammered in. So it has to be community modifiable. You must be able to modify it as a community member. If it's static and in control of the team that created it, it's not a metaverse. It has to be digitally scarce representations. You cannot be able to log into 50 different instances of the same metaverse at the same time and play in 50 different locations with the same avatar. Or worse yet, sell the NFT you used to log in while you're playing, and nothing's going to happen. I will leave it to your imagination to think which current metaverses allow this. Spoiler alert, all of them. And a human should easily be able to interact with other humans, which means it should not encounter UX barriers. It should not feel a headache when trying to communicate with others on these platforms or interact with the system on these platforms. This is also generally a blockchain problem, a huge UX problem. And last but not least, that human should permanently own their experience of this interaction. That human should not lose the invested time and attention when that metaverse inevitably disappears, because it's not a real metaverse. So these are the four main kind of pillars on which a metaverse must stand. And not having all of them means an unbalanced metaverse that can tip over and disappear. It must have all of these, in my opinion. So problem one of metaverses today, they're not actually metaverses. You've heard me say this before, probably. Metaverses are just multiplayer games at least current metaverses, are just multiplayer games that replaced username and password logins with reading a positive balance of an NFT. That's it. That's all they are today. Just multiplayer games running on the same centralized infrastructure by the same centralized teams, going down with everything else that goes down at the same time, and just using your NFT to log you in. Doesn't even use the NFT to make sure that you can stay logged in. Collabland, which is a bot that you can use to allow access to certain Discord rooms to people with NFTs, is more of a metaverse than most metaverses today, because that'll kick you if you sell the NFT. Metaverses will not. Problem 2 is that they're hard to play. You can't really expect the next billion, trillion, gazillion users to come on board if they need to sit down behind a computer or don a VR headset or use WASD for movement in a 3D space. You sure as hell can't expect them to install custom software on their machine just to run your game. The next million, billion users are not native gamers. They're not comfortable with this. They're not going to do this, and we are not going to onboard them with this. So this just doesn't work. And if you introduce into all of this the added mess of wallets, transactions, and passwords, and signing, and waiting for confirmations, nobody will use this. It will either be a fake metaverse, which doesn't have transactions, or it's going to be an unused one. Problem 3, they are very hard to build and plan for Web3 teams. Shocker, Web3 teams are actually terrible at designing economies. Most of them try to follow the DEX model of introducing a new token and just showering their users with it, the so-called play to earn. And as we all know from DEX operations, all of those tokens trend towards zero over time because they have no utility, no value. They're just used as a bribe token to get people to come over and stay there. By definition, all of these games that do the same thing vampire attack each other because they are still all competing for the same 200 players that we have in the metaverse today. Just the other day, there was a report that Sandbox and Decentraland combined have 1,000 users per day active. Kind of disappointing for projects of those valuations. So Web3 teams are horrible at designing long-lasting economies. They are exceptionally horrible at game development because most of them are neither gamers nor game developers, and they just jumped on the metaverse bandwagon because it was trendy. So what you end up with is teams that raise exorbitant amounts of money based on Unreal Engine 5 demos and then run into a wall when they're supposed to deliver a AAA experience, and then they wonder why it's not working out. There is a reason why in traditional game development, a team will not even tell you that they're building a game until they're 3 years in and have discarded 30 prototypes because they weren't fun enough. That's how things work there. You do not sell a game by just making it. You sell a game by iterating, making sure it's good, and being self-critical, not by raising before you even have the idea fleshed out completely. In most cases also, it takes an entire team to develop these sort of things. The economy itself needs a team of economists that know what they're doing. There are entire companies specializing in designing game economies with sources and drains, that's basically supply and demand of in-game resources, that can simulate your economy years and years in advance. Very few projects use this. And then you have all of this extra overhead of lore writing, map drawing, level design, character design, rendering, and all that to end up at a mediocre game, which is not community modifiable at all. Because you can't expect your community to be that same level, that same caliber of game developers so they can just make a new model that will be added to your game. And problem number 4 is that they are hard to build and plan and trust for game development teams. They do not like NFTs, and they do not like wallets. Wallets, fair enough, because you don't want your possibly hard-to-play game to be even harder to play by introducing a wallet, and by introducing passwords, and by introducing all of that complexity. So, of course, they don't want this. But more importantly, there is the very valid argument of game development teams that why would you use NFTs? If you have a character skin in Fortnite and you turn it into an NFT, it's not like you can take it into Counter-Strike. It's not going to work. You have a different rigging system. You have a different rendering system. The engine is different. It can't work. No, it can't. And you also can't go to the moon on a horse because you're using the wrong tech for the wrong things. So to fix this, you use a better standard that does allow you to do this, that does allow you to have different files to move between the games and to load the contextually correct file based on what game it's loaded in. But they're not aware that this exists. And so this is our problem as much as it is theirs. They're just not aware that the solution is out there and has been in production for a very long time. Well, relatively speaking. So how do we solve all of this? What do? Well, there is a miracle cure, and it's called the CipherMod SDK. And it can do a lot of things, the CipherMod SDK. It can do many, many wonderful things, but not any of these. So it can help you create forward-compatible collections of assets that are automatically backwards compatible as well with anything that has existed in the past. But it also helps you create these NFT-based operating systems, so to speak, that will never go down, that let you keep your experience in the NFTs themselves, and that uniquely allow a decentralized metaverse to actually exist. No servers, no backends, and definitely no loss of progress when that metaverse inevitably goes down. And why do I say that it inevitably goes down? Because right now, every new game, every new project, every single NFT collection to metaverse project, everything that comes out is vampire attacking everything else that already exists. They're mutually attacking each other for the same small player base. We are killing each other before we even brought in the critical mass of people that we need to survive from, a bigger audience. And so when you're running on a centralized server, and when your players stop feeding money into the system because they've been siphoned off by another project, your server becomes too expensive to maintain. You will shut it down. And if you're using archaic NFT standards, your progress goes down with them. It all goes away. You've gained nothing. All of metaverses today, all of Web3 gaming today is a joke. And CipherMod, which is an extension of this RMRK technology of our NFTs, makes this uniquely possible, solves these particular problems. So how do we build an SDK? Well, this SDK is a set of open source plugins. It's very much like Substrate for metaverses. And Substrate, as you might know, is the framework that most chains in Polkadot are based on. And how that came to be was Parity were building Kusama and Polkadot. And as they realized that there are some commonalities when building these chains and the other chains they built before, they realized, all right, there's some common problems here, so let's abstract that into an SDK. And then let's rebuild what we had before using the SDK, build on top of that, abstract these new solutions again into the SDK, rebuild again using that new SDK. And so you have this feedback loop of building which results in Substrate being used to build Polkadot and Kusama, which are being used to build Substrate. The same applies to this. There are currently 2 games being built using this SDK, and they could not be more contextually different. The 2 games are Fallout World and Skybreach. As RMRK, we're building Skybreach, and as Fallout were building Fallout World, we realized that we were solving the same problems a lot. And so it made sense to team up. And we teamed up to make this SDK, this open source SDK, available to everybody, which is kind of your way to get forkable games. If you think about it in terms of current game types and templates, you have 4 types of games right now on any major console. You have sports games, driving games, shooters, and over-the-shoulder action RPGs. Outliers are very, very rare. Mostly, 90% of it is just reskinned those 4 types. Well, what if it were very easy to just fork one of those games, modify the textures and lore, and you get a new game, which is what basically all of these studios are doing. That's basically what this enables. There's 4 hours of total content across all of Sandbox, and it's all just platformers jumping around. Nobody's playing Sandbox because nobody's building in it, and nobody's building in it because nobody's playing it. It's very difficult to build in. With CypherMod, you end up with an SDK that is able to deploy new game-like experiences for existing and new metaverses. So you would be able to fork a decentralized minigame for Sandbox very easily, modify it to your liking, and deploy it to Sandbox in a few clicks into land that you own. This proliferates the content available there and grows the player base. In regards to Fallout World and Skybreach, so Fallout World is this 3D MMORPG where you level up not by playing the game, but by being a good Web3 citizen. Your activities on-chain and off-chain are oracleized into Soulbound 2.0 NFTs, which are this RMRK tech that you have, where you have NFTs inside of other NFTs, but the NFTs that you've put inside them are non-transferable. So they're locked to the avatar. They're locked to your avatar. And this, I think, is a brilliant way of gamifying, of bringing in the next billion users to crypto, the next generation of users to crypto through extreme gamification, which young folks react to very positively. And Skybreach is the world's only decentralized metaverse where everything is on-chain because everything is in the state of the NFTs. If I have an avatar and a plot of land, the only way for that avatar to be in the plot of land is for me to send that avatar into the plot of land. The land contains the avatar. And this is on-chain. You don't need a backend checking for me cheat spawning across the map. So all of your state is in there. And as you play with your avatar, you end up with a system of ownership of experience, which we've talked about before. So the community modifiable aspect is handled by the forkability of CypherMod. You can easily fork an existing experience. So it's easily community modifiable. To get this character progression system and the ownership of experience, you have the ability to put experience points, which are non-transferable NFTs, skills, which are non-transferable NFTs, even a brain with skill slots, which is a non-transferable NFT, into these avatars. So you have a character progression system. You have an NFT that becomes more valuable every time you stop playing. So not only do you own your experience of having played, so your time doesn't go to waste, your NFT becomes generational wealth. You can pass it on. In 40 years, I can give my grandson my Fortnite character and tell him, here, Billy, go destroy everybody in Fortnite 62. So that's ownership of experience. And we have community modifiable, easy community modifiability. Now, for ease of interactions, we have abstracted this somewhat, and we're still working on this, where you have session keys that are permission for certain types of actions. So when you do need to do transactions, you would, for example, generate from a master key a session key that is used only for movement. This session key is then stored in local storage only, and it doesn't matter if you lose it or if it gets stolen. The worst thing that somebody can do is move you around a little bit. But the game itself, the game environment itself, will be able to just auto-sign transactions that you need to move from area to area. So that works really well. Additionally, metaverses today, if you really want that reach, they need to be hyper-casual. They need to reach the general audiences, and for that, you need really approachable ways to play. You can't have a downloadable client. You cannot expect them to use WASD to move around. You cannot have them in 3D space. If you've ever put a non-gamer in front of a 3D game and gave them the mouse into their hand, you have either 10 minutes of frustration or 10 minutes of laughter ahead of you, because they simply cannot understand how that works. It just doesn't compute. And so you cannot bring non-gamers into this world like this. And pay-to-win games on mobile know this really well. That's the hyper-casual type that you want, but that's not. But you want this without their greed. And so, CipherMod is this all-around toolkit that lets you solve this by having sane defaults. And so this is just some of the stuff that this kind of enables. You have these Soulbound 2.0 NFTs explained here. But in general, one of the biggest perks of this is that by launching in this ecosystem, you get the availability of the global item economy. Since everything you launch is compatible with everything that's been launched in the past, you get assets that are compatible with everything new and everything old. And so why is that beneficial? Well, right now, if you have a traditional NFT system, a project that loses popularity dies. If you have a game where Vikings are chopping trees and people stop playing it, in traditional blockchains or projects, that's dead. That project is dead. Here, a new game can join the ecosystem. That new game can make those access compatible with itself. And so what happens now? Now, the owners of those access have something new and shiny to play with. They can go somewhere else. The game inherited the player base from before. It didn't vampirize it. The project from before got new value injected into it because now those NFTs can be used in more things. This is where the degen score comes into play. The degen score for NFTs, because the more things it's compatible with, the more valuable an NFT is. And the new game also saved time on research and development of these assets. It can just inherit them from another system in a fully decentralized way. And this scales quadratically for every new game that joins this ecosystem. It's a huge pie that grows every time somebody joins, because everything else that already exists is becoming compatible with everything that's coming. So vampire attacks of game to game are no longer a thing. The community grows together because it's all based on one flexible standard that extends the existing ones and doesn't compete. It just makes everything better. The pile of money that's being left on the table right now is truly enormous by AAA publishers who ignore this aspect, who ignore the tradability of skins and cosmetics across these different games. The royalties and commissions alone are mind-boggling. Not to mention the effect this could have on the global creator economy, where anybody can contribute new assets to any existing or new game, because you don't have to talk to the teams anymore to add those assets into those games. And so this is something like how it would look in terms of a wizard where you're selecting what to build. You can have here, so you start by selecting the metaverse you're building for. It can be an existing one or a new one. I can tell it, build me a new metaverse, a new game that's based on Open Diablo, and all the items are NFTs. Or I can tell it, I want to build a bottle collecting game for Sandbox for Coca-Cola. Works all the same. Then you pick your NFT infrastructure. We assume that most people are going to pick Remark because it just does everything that ERC 721 does and more. Then you pick the chain you want to deploy their architecture on. This supports any EVM chain, any substrate chain now, and many more chains coming up. Optionally, you can pick a DID provider to get the bots out of your game. Naturally, most games will not pick this because then they can't say they have 100,000 monthly users. Then you pick the game template. This is an interesting concept. We have a library of game types, templates, and economies that are pre-simulated for you. So you don't need to waste a year on tokenomic research. You have a pre-simulated economy you can just apply to your game. And so you can have something from the leftmost side of the spectrum, like nothing at all, and you end up with basically a Habbo hotel online, to the rightmost version that's most extreme, like something like Factorio. All of this pre-simulated for you, and all of this expandable by other people. Everybody can contribute to this, because it's all open source. Every section of this is open source. And then you pick a backend that you want. This can be centralized, like everybody does right now, or it can be Fala, who are our build partners in this CipherMod effort, and provide a decentralized alternative to AWS. Finally, you end. This is not in competition with Unreal Engine or Unity or RPG Maker or anything like that. This is a configurator that passes on all of this configured setup to the compiler that you eventually want to launch. So you can use this to launch an Unreal Engine 5 thing. You can use this to launch a land and sandbox. You can use this to launch for your target platform. That's the beauty of it. We're not actually trying to vampirize anyone else. And so that's basically it. CypherMod is on the way. We just started, but please feel free to visit these links. Sign up for our newsletter on cyphermod.com and stay up to date. It's very fresh, very new, but we are looking to talk to as many game projects as possible, game-related, so that we learn of your problems and the compromises you've had to make, so that maybe we're not hoping to convert you to our tech, but maybe we can build the solutions that the next generation of builders will be able to use to avoid the problems that you guys ran into. Thank you. Do we have time for a question?
Sorry, my mic was muted. Yeah, I think we have time for question. If you have time to.
Sorry?
If you have time to.
Yeah,
we have a little bit time.
I'd be happy to answer any questions if there's anybody.
So, do we have a question? Okay, sorry.
Hey, Bruno. Thanks for the talk. One of the things that I've seen some, like, not metaverses, but like, blockchain games do is that they don't really think about the block time, right? So if every action that I want to do in the game is a action that will be reflected on the blockchain, it means that I will have to wait, right? If I do, I don't know, buy this item or whatever, I'll have to wait 12 seconds or 17 seconds for that action to actually take place, right? What do you see to fix this problem if you want to make every action in the game sort of like be like backed up in the blockchain? That would really worsen the UX for the user, right? How do you see this issue being fixed?
Yeah, so in most cases, rollups. In most cases, L2s and rollups. So these per block, well, per transaction actions lend themselves really, really well to turn-based stuff, because there you think you can make very easily a civilization game on chain or a Go game or a chess game on chain, and all of that works really, really well. But in terms of more faster interactions and everything, you absolutely need stuff like Boba or Optimism or whatever else you want to use for rolling up the operations and just compiling them into one transaction. So yeah, it's full of trade-offs in terms of where you want to build and what type of game you're building.
Another question?
I'm sorry, I can't see anybody.
No, I try to see too.
Yeah, yell if you want to ask a question.
You see someone that would ask another question? No, you
I don't see anything.
Okay, thank you. Perfect, please.
Hi, merci. I joined a bit late, so sorry if you already answered that question, but I think it's very clear that you have incredible tech, but how will you onboard more people to actually use this? Because I asked sometimes people from Sandbox what they think about your tech and everything, and or people who are gamers, and they were like, yeah, I think Sandbox and all the other ones might have this advantage of just being there early. So what would be your approach to onboard more people?
That's a good question I don't have an answer to. I'm horrible at marketing and outreach, and I would really love it if I could get some help with that. I don't know. So we're talking to many projects. We're talking to L1s. We're talking to, from chains to games to everybody for integrating this. We're trying to help everybody build. And yet, still, there is this Polkadot moat where we are unable to penetrate beyond it. This is what we're working heavily on right now with our EVM implementation. We want to invade the EVMs and just make ourselves known that way. But it just, I think there's just a lack of hype and stuff. We have not focused at all on hype, only building, and it's definitely biting us in the ass. So yeah, if you have any ideas, mostly we need the community, mostly we need builders, we need people that experiment on this, that build interesting things. So, you know, if you have any aspirations about this, so this is not just for games. It's easiest to explain on games, but this is great for reputational system, for loyalty points, for real estate, for music crafting, for a lot of different things. So anything your team is trying to build, we're trying to get as many use cases as possible. We're getting nothing from this. We're not earning any money from people using our tech. So please come and use it because it's completely like open and we just want to upgrade it for everybody else. So yeah, in short, I don't know. I don't know, but we'll do our best. Okay,
Thank you very much.